Today I'm going to make apple pie. I'll put the list of ingredients and the utensils you need on my video. You can pause the video, write them down, and then we'll get started. We'll start by mixing our salt and our sugar with our flour. We'll cover the bowl and set it aside while we prepare the butter and the shortening. We'll cut the butter into lengthwise strips and then into cubes. With our butter in cubes, we'll lay the shortening out alongside of it. And we'll put that in the freezer for about an hour. We'll slice a lemon. Put it in the lemon squeezer and strain it into a bowl of water that we're going to use for our apples. We'll wash our apples and strain them, and then we'll core and slice each apple. We'll then remove any of the core that's left, peel the apples as we go along. We'll put them in our bowl of water with lemon juice. We'll cover the apples and set them aside. Our butter's been in the freezer now for about an hour, and we're going to add it to our flour mixture. Along with the shortening. At this point I'm going to use the pastry blender, and we'll work in the butter and the shortening into the flour. And what we want to do is leave some chunks of butter and shortening there. We've incorporated the butter and the shortening into the flour, and now what we want to do is go around with just small amounts of water around the edge of the bowl and pick up the flour with it and incorporate the water this way. You don't want to stir it in because it will end up just being mushy. So we're going to do this with about 6 tablespoons of water. So we've incorporated the water. Actually used about 8 tablespoons, and this is how it should look. Spread some wax paper out here on the pastry board, and I'm going to dust it with flour. I've divided the dough in half, and as you can see, the butter pieces are still visible. That's what you want, and you want to start shaping it like so. Dust a little bit of flour on top. Add another layer of wax paper, and then we can start to roll out the dough. It won't always hold together, so what you need to do in those cases is remove the wax paper and just keep reshaping it, just gently. You don't want this dough to get warm. So I'm going to go around and loosen the crust from the bottom. It's okay if it breaks because we're just going to patch it right back together. And we're going to loosen it up, and then we'll end up gliding it into the pan. So I've moved the pie crust into the pan. As you can see, it broke in some places, which is fine. That's to be expected because this is going to be a really flaky pie crust. At this point, we want to put it back in the refrigerator along with the other half of the dough to keep it cold. While we're waiting for the crust to get cold again, we'll put our apples in a bowl, and this is where we have the opportunity to use our home canned pie filling. So you want to add that to the apples. Along with our extra sugar and our nutmeg. And then we'll stir that up. going to keep this in the refrigerator now while we keep working on the crust. Okay, I've taken our pie crust out of the refrigerator, and I'm just fixing some of the places here where there were breaks in it. To prep the lower crust, we're taking a piece of foil and shortening on it. Now we'll lay the foil down gently and add our dried beans to it. And we'll bake this at around 400 for a few minutes. We baked the lower shell for 10 minutes at 400 degrees. I removed the foil and the beans, and we can see now that the bottom still needs to be baked just a little bit longer. I'm also going to fill in some of the areas that are broken with more of our pie crust. So I'm going to fill in these areas, a bit of pie crust, and then we're going to put it back in the oven for around 5 minutes. We baked the crust for an additional, actually 7 minutes without the foil on it, so that we could get a nice firm crust at the bottom. And the goal here is so that it won't be soggy when we make our apple pie. We'll cover the crust very lightly, and then we'll set it aside and let it come to room temperature. For the top crust, we're going to lay down wax paper on our board, pastry board, and just dust it with flour. Taking the pie crust dough out of the refrigerator, shaped it into a disc, and as you can see, it's crumbly, but that's exactly what we want. Put another layer of wax paper on top of that, and then we start the process of rolling. It will start to flake and seem as if it's falling apart, and when that happens, we can just stop, remove the wax paper, and try to keep it shaped. A good practice when you're working with this kind of dough is to take a pastry scraper and just loosen it up from the bottom so that it doesn't, we know it's not sticking to the wax paper. We can also add a little bit more flour dusting and then turn the crust over and add some more flour and the wax paper and keep rolling. When it reaches about the size we want, we can take off some of the edges and smooth it around to be more like a circle, but again, it doesn't have to be perfect, because when we put this on the pie, we'll be fixing any patching things that we need to. When it gets up to a certain size, we can go around and again try to keep it in a circle if possible. If you want to get the size close and double check your pie. Make sure it's wide enough. To assemble the pie, take our apples, which we've kept in the refrigerator, and we start filling the pie shell. To make sure our pie filling is nice and thick, take another jar of our canned filling, because that's where we have that nice thick sauce, filling gel, I guess you would call it, that we made when we canned these. And we'll just do that all over to top it off. Now we'll take an egg yolk with 2 teaspoons of water, and we'll brush it lightly around the edges of our pie crust. Put the pie on top of a sheet covered with aluminum foil, and then use our pastry scraper to get under the pie dough, and we're going to do our best to glide this on top of the pie. If it breaks, it's okay, because we're going to be able to patch it. So, just going around and patching a few places with the dough. Where we have some extra, we'll just move that over here, and like so. If we need to patch anything, we can do so after we've coated our pie crust completely with the egg yolk. So I've covered the top of the pie with egg yolk, all the crust, And in areas that I want to patch, I just use my spatula here. At this point, you can add little shapes with a fork along the edge of the pie. It helps to seal it, and it makes it look pretty. Once we have the edges ready, we can poke steam holes into the pie. And then we're going to dust it with sugar all around. Alright, we've covered our pie with sugar. I'm just going to reinforce those steam holes. If you have a pie collar, this is the point at which you would put it on. If you don't, you can make some strips of aluminum foil and wrap it around to protect the edge of the crust, because that will burn first. Then we're going to put it in the oven. We baked our pie for 45 minutes. First for 15 minutes at 400 degrees, and then I turned it down to 375, turned the oven down to 375, and baked it a little longer. Sometimes you have to keep an eye on the pie to make sure that it's not browning too much. If it seems like it is, then you want to cover it with aluminum foil. So your oven temperatures may vary. So there you have it, homemade apple pie with homemade and home canned apple pie filling.